Hello, friends. So, we've got exciting news for you, and that is the legendary British director Christopher Nolan has a new film in store just for you. Now, if I'm honest, Christopher Nolan is a filmmaker whose films I've enjoyed in the past. I'm a particularly big fan of Memento, which I believe was his second feature, but is not someone whose films I've been particularly interested in watching for over 10 years now. Interstellar had some decent emotional moments in it, and Inception was a fun action film. And hell, even though the plot made no sense whatsoever, Dark Knight Rises is still a fun film to watch with some great set pieces in it. But since Interstellar, I've not watched any of his films. Which ones has he done? He's done Dunkirk, didn't watch that. He's done, what was the one where the film's protagonist was called Protagonist? Tenet. Didn't watch that, and I certainly didn't watch Oppenheimer. His style of filmmaking, to me, has just become very dour and slow-paced and dull and pretentious. He was always a pretentious filmmaker, but he's never been able to reach those same heights as Memento, some of the Dark Knight trilogy, and The Prestige as well, which is a really, really underrated film in his catalogue. But maybe he'll be able to make it up to us with his new film, which has been announced. That is The Odyssey. Now, I've not actually read The Odyssey. We've got numerous copies of it in the office. Like, we've got this really, really lovely one that was sent in by a viewer that was translated by, let me check here, Alexander Pope. And I do intend on reading it at some point this year because I know it's part of the classic Western canon. You've got the Iliad, you've got the Odyssey, then more Anglo-Saxon, you've got things like Beowulf, you've got the works of Shakespeare. It all forms part of the higher cultural canon, which realistically we should be better educated in. Obviously in school, I learned about Shakespeare, I learned about some of the plays of Christopher Marlowe, but we never went into anything as old or as epic as the Odyssey, which I think was a terrible shame. I feel like I really missed out on something from that. So I can't really judge what the quality of this is going to be from knowing Nolan as a filmmaker and knowing the story, but I do know that this has already been generating a lot of controversy with some of his casting choices, in fact with basically all of his casting choices, and you can see a few of them here already. So for the less questionable ones, people have got Anne Hathaway, Matt Damon, Robert Pattinson. Now, Pattinson's put in some excellent performances in films like The Lighthouse, and he was a decent Batman as well recently, so I've no doubt he can put in a decent performance with whatever role he's cast in. But mainly people are complaining about things like this. Zendaya, possibly, no, certainly the most overexposed actor in Hollywood today. I don't watch any film with her involved in it, because I don't want to, because of how overexposed she's in. It doesn't feel like there goes a day by without her being cast in some new film, and it really feels like they are just trying to force her into our faces. And the problem is with this, is that in the era of social media, and an era of on-demand film and television streaming services, I think the idea of the movie star is really beginning to die out. These people don't have the same separation from us that they used to. We don't have that same distance. And also, it's not like we're a captivated audience quite as much anymore, where you go to see what's on at the cinema and you maybe refer back to what few DVDs and videos that you have at home if you want to watch something in between then. Now we just have the ultimate catalogue of most of recorded film available at our fingertips whenever we want them. And also, again, people like Zendaya, their social media presence means that we don't get that same mystique that comes with it. So generally, celebrity is dying to me. And now when you see somebody like Zendaya, it feels more like she's being pushed on you rather than that she's being hired because of her immense talents. Similarly, Lupita Nyong'o, interesting choice. She's a fine actor, but this is an ancient Greek epic story. I'd be curious to see what role she'll be playing here. And then also Tom Holland, which some people were theorizing Tom Holland might be cast as Odysseus. Again, I've not read the story, but I've seen other depictions of Odysseus from other media, other adaptations, and Tom Holland, tiny little twink boy. Odysseus is supposed to be a grizzled war hero. He's a king. Tom Holland just doesn't have the gravitas for it. So those were the interesting casting choices that people picked up on straight away. And then just the other day, this news came out. Elliot, I see you typing in the comments, don't you dare. Elliot Page has now also been cast in the Odyssey. So we're getting a trans actor in the Odyssey, which again worries me because one of the fascinations that people have with ancient Greek culture right now, going back to the Odyssey, going back to the Iliad, and speaking about people like Plato and Aristotle, is they are desperate to convince us that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans were all gay. And so I worry that there might be some kind of trans narrative put in there. We'll see what ends up happening, but I don't think it's promising. And we can see a better breakdown of most of the casting decisions that have been announced. Since then, we've got this man, Himesh Patel, who's an Indian man, John Leguizamo, who is Hispanic, I believe, Charlize Theron. Not all of the casting choices are disastrous, but there are enough strange casting choices to get you to cock an eyebrow, so to speak, because I'm not very enthusiastic about this. And one of the things that my colleague Josh has pointed out is that this is an ancient Greek poem. It's set in the Mediterranean, and yet there are no Greeks as of yet cast in it, which could be seen as being somewhat disrespectful to our European heritage, because of course when we talk about the Western canon, we are talking about European history and culture. And God knows we've had enough of that disrespected over the past half a century to last a lifetime. And he also pointed out that he doubts that the historic peoples of the Mediterranean will be accurately represented in Christopher Nolan's version of the Odyssey. And we can here see a nice map charting the course of Odysseus's journey across his Odyssey. And it looks, I see this sort of thing and I think, God, I really need to read this. And I will. I already have a copy of it. I think it's Richard Lattimore's translation or Robert Fagel's, whichever one. It's a very well-respected translation that I own that does justice to the original poem as it was written, which is not what you can say, or I've heard said, for this version, the Emily Wilson version. And this is something that also worries me about Christopher Nolan's adaptation, because the modernism that can come into the film is not just represented by the cast, it's represented by how it's going to be scripted, the kinds of themes it's going to highlight, and the way that the characters are going to be portrayed, right? And Emily Wilson's translation seems to me to be a perfect example of the way that our classics, our history, our culture are being disrespected through anachronous feminist interpretations, because this is, as far as I'm aware, the most recent translation. This is a tweet trying to glaze it, saying, oh, you've never read the Odyssey? Well, Emily Wilson's translation is the best one in literally ages, and has a sweet iambic pentameter to give it a bouncy feel, and makes dude bros cry that this classic has gone woke. Now, I'll address the woke thing in a moment, but the actual translation is compared here across some of the various other versions. So you've got the opening line, sums it up pretty well. Robert Fitzgerald says, "Sing in me, muse, and through me tell the story of that man skilled in all ways of contending, the wanderer, harried for years on end, after he plundered the stronghold on that proud height of Troy." T.E. Lawrence, "Divine Posy, goddess daughter of Zeus, sustain for me this song of the various-minded man who, after he had plundered the innermost citadel of the hallowed Troy, was made to stray grievously about the coasts of men, the sport of their customs, good or bad, while his heart, through all the seafaring, aching in agony to redeem himself and bring his company safe home." Robert Fagel's, which is a 1996 translation. "Sing to me of the man, muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course once he had plundered the hollow heights of Troy. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds, many pains he suffered, heartsick on the open sea, fighting to save his life and bring his comrades home. So they're all quite poetic, obviously major variation between all of them in the choice of words, but all conveying the same theme. How does Emily Wilson convey that same theme? Tell me about a complicated man, Muse. Tell me how he wandered and was lost when he had wrecked the holy town of Troy, and where he went, and who he met, the pain he suffered in the storms at sea, and how he worked to save his life and bring his men back home. Now, I've seen this defended by saying that it's simplified and will be more accessible to a new audience, which is a modern audience, I assume, the mythical modern audience who is so eager to read an ancient Greek ancient Greek poem that's almost 3,000 years old. The modern audience needing everything to be dumbed down to the utmost extremes for them, because the modern audience is a gaggle of toddlers with the emotional maturity of a toddler, and certainly the reading skills of an illiterate. And so, I see these, and I've not read the full story, but I can tell you that of these translations, Emily Wilson's is easily the most simplistic, easily the most dumbed down, the least poetic sounding. It sounds like somebody talking to you at the pub, which might appeal to some. It doesn't appeal to me when I'm reading back on ancient classical poetry. But this is not the worst thing about it, as far as I'm concerned. The worst thing is the attitude that goes into it that makes it so Emily Wilson makes the decisions that she does, because I've also heard from other people that her translation goes out of its way to try to reframe the character of Odysseus, not as being a heroic character, but as being somebody who should be looked upon with suspicion, looked upon with a feminist eye, shall we say. Critical Drinker has an excerpt here from an interview that she did, where she said that there's an idea that Homer has to sound heroic and ancient. Endorsing, Wilson told me, but that idea comes with a value system attached, one that includes endorsing this very hierarchical kind of society, as if that's what heroism is. I hate to break it to you, Emily, but heroism, being a hero, implies hierarchy. If you are a hero, you are above others. Doesn't necessarily mean that you should be unkind to them. In fact, to me, it implies a responsibility to try to pull others up with you if you are a hero. But that inherently means that there is some kind of hierarchy. You are above others. You are more talented than others. You are stronger and braver than others. You are more virtuous than others. All of these things are implied through heroism. But to the modern feminist, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because hierarchy is automatically bad, because it's mean, because it's cruel to those beneath you, even if you have some kind of noblesse oblige. And this interview quote is taken from this, which was a Vox article titled Historically, Men Translated the Odyssey, which is a no, can't have men translating things. They'll do it in a mannish way, which is automatically evil and automatically misogynist. Here's what happened when a woman took the job. And most of this article, feminist guff, trying to make it sound as though it's bad that, it's not a feminist text. Odysseus goes around the world and has sex with beautiful women, which just infuriates ugly harpies. You know it does, because Odysseus would never sleep with them. But one of the most interesting quotes I found was closer down here. Here's the quote that Drinker pointed out. But one of the... I love this. This is quite the endorsement. Wilson's language is often plain. Yeah, that's what I want from this. That's going to paint dramatic scenes and feelings of emotion and striking imagery in me is plain language. No, it's not. And where is it? Here we go. Wilson does not give Penelope more agency or power than she has in the original poem, but she also does not take any of the Queen's original power away by making descriptions of her conform to modern gender stereotypes. Part of, and this is a quote now, part of fighting misogyny in the current world is having a really clear sense of what structures of thought and the structures of society are that have enabled androcentrism. I looked it up, it means favoring a male perspective over a female perspective in different cultures, including our own. And the Odyssey, looked at the right way, can help readers understand those structures more clearly. The poem offers a defense of a male-dominant society, a defense of its own hero and his triumph over everybody else, she said. But it also seems to provide these avenues for realizing what's so horrible about this narrative and what's missing about this narrative. This is part of the high culture, classic Western canon. She is talking about Homer's epic poem, the Odyssey. And apparently, she, with her modern, enlightened feminist view, has decided that there is a lot missing about the narrative because it doesn't focus on the women enough. It doesn't give them enough power, and it focuses far too much on a hierarchical and male-dominant society, which inherently, as we all know, is terrible. And so, while Christopher Nolan's adaptation is worrying many people through the casting choices, which I think is a perfectly reasonable thing to be worried about, I think we should be equally, if not more, worried about the fact that there is a good chance that these kinds of modern interpretations intended for the dumbed-down cattle modern audience are going to find their representation through his version. I don't know if he's going to be writing it, and I don't know who is going to be advising him on which version, which translation to adapt, if they're going to be using modern language, and if, with people like Zendaya and Lupita Nyong'o involved, they're going to be putting a primary focus on the women at the expense of the heroism of Odysseus himself. I can only hope that it will turn out to be a good adaptation, but again, Nolan has not interested me for a very, very long time. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care.